Good morning. Welcome everybody this morning, January 8th, 2024, to the Urban County Policy Board. Hope you all had a great holiday season this year and you're ready to put on your thinking hats here and get going on this important process. So looking forward to it. I would like to take just a few minutes here, especially given that it's the beginning of the year, for each individual to introduce themselves. Please also let us know what your position is, as well as the jurisdiction that you're representing. That would be helpful, and we'll go ahead and start in the room.
Good morning, Rebecca Royce, Clark County Community Services Program Coordinator and staff to this board.
Good morning, Michael Torres, Clark County Community Services Program Manager with Home and CDBG.
Glenn Young, Clark County Council.
Ron Onslow from the city of Ridgefield.
Troy McCoy, Mayor Battleground.
Okay, we've exhausted the supply in the room. So those who are in virtual land, please go ahead. Rebecca, you can see those, so if you could call them, that'd be great.
Let's start with Chuck Green.
Green, Public Works Director of City of Ridgefield.
Can't hardly hear you, Chuck. Speak up.
Well, I've got to figure out where my microphone ended up. Chuck Green with Public Works Director of the City of Ridgefield.
Thank you. Janet Snook.
Janet Snook, Clark County.
Jim Hodges.
Jim Hodges, City Camas Capital Manager.
Marina Veray. Marina, we cannot hear you.
We heard her trying to say something.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Slightly better, but not really.
Okay, sorry, it's the microphone. I'm Marina Veray with the town of Yakult.
Thank you, Marina.
You're welcome.
I don't think it's on our end.
And we have Beth Landry also joining us this morning.
She's a YWCA.
Okay, thank you. So we will move forward with our items of business to number 2, which is approval of September 11th, 2023 meeting minutes. It's been a while, but do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Ron Onslow, second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the September 11th, 2023 minutes. Is there any discussion before we hold a vote? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? We wouldn't be able to hear you anyway. Okay, so next order of business is to select our 2024 vice chair. And with that, I don't think Cherish is in this meeting, but we're grateful for her service last year in this position. It doesn't require a whole lot of effort usually. But is there a motion? Does anybody have a motion for a nomination for the vice chair?
Well, I would nominate Troy McCoy from Battleground. He's here and alive. That's good.
Okay, so we have a motion for Troy McCoy from Battleground. Is there a second to that motion?
You don't need a second for that.
I'll second.
Okay, I heard a second. Who was that?
Jim Hodges.
Jim Hodges, okay. Are there any other motions for recommendation? Okay. All right, hearing none. Is there any discussion prior to us holding a vote on Troy Hodges from Battleground?
Troy McCoy.
Troy McCoy, sorry.
You had Hodges in the brain.
Yeah.
Did you bring your resume with you?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't hear any, so let's go ahead and hold a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? Okay, motion stands. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so item number 4, which is the draft 2023 annual work plan. I'll go ahead and turn it over to staff at this time.
Thank you so much. So as we've been in the last couple of years, we've had a work plan to kind of help guide us on what we want to accomplish during the year. This year, I took a look at that work plan, and I wanted to make sure that we set some more specific meetings throughout the year. The bylaws state we have to have 5 meetings per year, so we want to make sure that we are meeting that requirement of the bylaws. And I also wanted to bring in more training and program updates to this board. There's quite a few things that have been changing through HUD, including the Buy America, Build America. Section 3 has changed, which are pertinent to the activities that the boards do when we do our infrastructure projects back in your locations. And so I thought it would be good to bring those trainings to the board themselves. So I've presented a draft work plan that includes meetings January as our normal meeting schedule, February, March, June, September, and then typically I would recommend having another meeting in November. However, that will land on Veterans Day this year. So I wanted to bring to the board the option of either moving the November meeting to October or maybe moving it out 1 week in November. So it would be the 3rd Monday of November rather than the 2nd Monday of November. As you look through the work plan, you'll see that there's quite a few new discussions that haven't taken place in previous years, along with those trainings that I'd like to have scheduled. And then we would like to have a more robust discussion with the board near the end of the year to talk about what you would like to see for next year's work plan so that we can kind of plan ahead also. So you'll see that as a discussion topic later in the year. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the work plan and then discussion about November's meeting and then a motion to accept or adopt the work plan for the year.
Does anybody have any questions or thoughts on that?
I have a question on the responsibilities, one of the bullet points. And I don't know if this is a change or not being new. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th one where it says the program, or at least 51% will be for low and moderate income. Is that new or changed at all? No. It's always been 51% because had some conversations with some cities that didn't apply, and basically they said they, because they didn't have a low income area, they didn't submit an application. So were they incorrect in assuming that? Does that 51% for the municipality, or is it for the whole block grant?
So home and CDBG is required to serve low and moderate income jurisdictions or areas, and in that 51% of the population need to be low income. However, Clark County is an exception criteria, so our exception to that is a little bit lower, and off the top of my head I don't remember what it is, but I think it's about 48 or 47%. So we can actually go to that level of the population to ensure that we have enough areas within our jurisdiction that are eligible for low-mod area type projects. And so if there's any jurisdictions that are questioning or want to talk, we can do that. There's also, depending on what type of project it is, it could be something that we do a income survey of the service area of a project rather than looking at census tracts and block groups.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions about the work plan?
Doesn't look like it.
Fantastic. So for the board, would it work better to move the meeting to October, the 2nd Monday in October, or would we like to do the 3rd Monday of November?
That's too far away for my brain to compute. I don't have a preference. I think I probably would be okay either way. I don't think we have, I mean, that's a Thursday, right? What day was it?
Monday.
Monday, also.
18th.
Okay, yeah, so all my meetings on Monday kind of bounce around. I could make it work, so.
I'd leave it at October on the time that you like. That way, if it doesn't work, then you can move it to November.
You don't have a quorum?
Okay, that's a good option.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will schedule it for October at this time, and then if we need to, we can move it to the third Monday in November. And with that, I would ask that there be a motion to adopt.
Yep. Do we have a motion to adopt the 2024 annual work plan?
So move. Ron Onslow.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
And seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed?
Yeah,
Okay, motion stands. Okay. All right, so at this point in time, we'll go to item 5, which is 2024 CDBG and home application updates.
Thank you. So as you can see on the screen, we had a total of 18 applications apply for funding. We had several pre-applications opt not to complete the full application for a variety of reasons. And so we have 18 that submitted the full application. We estimate right now to have approximately $1.8 million for CDBG funded activities and about $750,000 for home funded activities. We will know the more solid number when we get to March when we do the funding decision, so we'll have that number for you. But at this time, that's what we're estimating. We can see that we have 4 applications that fall under our public facilities and neighborhood improvements. 2 are acquisitions for nonprofit organizations, and 2 are infrastructure projects for small cities. We have several applications, more than we've ever seen, under our asset and economic development category, mostly for business technical assistance, but we also have 2 programs for home buyer down payment assistance programs. And then under our affordable housing and homelessness, we have several tenant-based rental assistance applications, as is typical, and 1 project, which is the construction of Weaver Creek Commons. They came in for funding in 2021 and received funding. They have gone through the LIHTC application process, and they're coming back for additional funds to make sure that they have enough to secure that project. So the applications will go through the normal process. Staff are currently reviewing all of the applications to make sure that they are clear and understandable before we release them to the Urban County Policy Board for your review. Our plan is to have the applications to you in early February to give you approximately a month to do your scoring. The scores for that will be due by March 4th so that we have them ready for the March meeting with the Urban County Policy Board to make those final funding decisions. Any questions about the applications we received?
I'd just like to make a comment that, so we're looking at about 1.8 million likely being available and requests for 2.6 for CDBG, and likewise with home funding, it's a request for 1.1 million and 750,000 available, so.
It's not untypical to have more applications for.
Yeah, and I think it's a better problem to have more applications than less, so.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And we'll definitely talk about more about that in a further conversation at this meeting.
Okay. And do you have anything else, or are we moving on to program updates?
Unless there's any other questions.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so we, as we get ready for those applications, we just wanted to do a refresher on the neighborly scoring system, and that's the system that you guys will be using to go in and do your scoring for the applications. There's a scoring step-by-step instructional guide available on the Urban County Policy website, and that is provided here for you. I also want to recommend that you look through the funding guides that are available for each application type. Those include kind of a matrix, an idea to help understand what is asked within each of those questions and how to score them, like a low, medium, and high type scoring. So you would still make your decision on what that number looks like, but it would help guide for you to understand what we're looking for in those applications, and then you can make those scoring.
Can I make a plug for something?
Michael, yes, go ahead, Michael.
So as you look through those matrices, I encourage you to just take notes at the side and give us feedback on on how that matrix is working for you so that we can adapt and implement for next year. You know, just so we can do continuous process improvement. So we do that internally, like you know, Rebecca is excellent at taking notes, like on our documents and stuff like that. But it would be very helpful for us to hear back from the Urban County Policy Board on the scoring recommendations.
We had some conversation on that last year. Were there any changes made this year?
We did, I can't remember which one, but we did some minor changes based on feedback we got, but I think that we could have done a lot better in terms of being systematic and deliberate about collecting feedback early on. So that's the reason I'm just prompting this is I really encourage either print it out or, you know, somehow take notes about how it's working for you so we can take action on that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I have a document for the 2025 RFA that has many notes on ways to improve the process and the questions that we're asking. So when we release the applications to you, you will be given or sent an email notification that they're available, and when you log in, this is an example of what you will see once you log in. And so you'll log in and then click the public facilities and infrastructure, and then move on to asset and economic development, and then affordable housing and homelessness. Make sure you score for all three of the programs. And then the other thing I'll remind is that not all questions have, or all applications, they submit answers to all questions. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but as a reminder that you won't score every single question in all three of them. Once you log in, you'll click on the Complete Scoring tab on the left-hand side. That allows you to start the scoring process. And then the score report will show and be available, and it'll show the points available, and then you can add in your points. Again, recommend using those funding guides to help you understand what the questions and what would be a good response to each of the questions. The public facilities and neighborhood improvements have two application types. There's infrastructure and there's social service. So in your scoring and in the application process, you'll see that there is responses for neighborhood improvements. They will be looking at the construction side, and they'll be answering that section of questions. And the social service acquisition applications will not answer those questions, but they will be under the social service side, and there's some specific questions to them. So when you're scoring, if there's not a response, you won't enter in any scores for those questions specifically. There should not be more than 100 points available for every application type. Under the affordable housing and homelessness, there's also two types of projects. There's the construction, so that could be the acquisition of multifamily property. It could be construction of multifamily. It could be rehab of multifamily. So those all would fall under construction, or our tenant-based rental assistance, which is obviously a very different type of program and would have very different questions for them to answer. So that's all I have for the scoring refresher. We will send out emails when we're ready to send those out to you, and to verify who should be receiving the email so that they can access and make the scores. We typically send them to the mayors, but we know not all the mayors are the ones scoring the applications, and so we'll discuss with you who I should set that up to make sure that the appropriate person has access to do the scoring.
Ask a quick question if I could. I'm noticing these categories tend to, there's some new things under the public facilities, and I'm noticing it used to be just small cities there, and I know that the matrix was expanded, but how does staff decide which category those fit in? Because I'm seeing like a homeless in the public facilities, but there's actually an affordable housing and homelessness category, so I'm trying to...
Yeah, actually, they've always been there. We just haven't received any applications over the last few years that would fall under the social service side of the public facilities section. Since the last consolidated plan, how these have been set up. the applications have been set up based on the consolidated plan itself. And a lot of it has to do with the funding that will be associated with it, specifically if it's eligible for CDBG or if it's eligible for home funds. The acquisition of nonprofit buildings or rehab of a nonprofit building is a CDBG eligible activity, which is why we have it under the Public Facilities and Neighborhood Improvement section versus the tenant-based rental assistance, which is a home eligible activity. There are CDBG funds that support that program for case management, and that's why you'll see CDBG listed under the affordable housing and homelessness. But out of all of the other, and the primary reason for that application is because it's a home eligible activity.
Okay, understand. And so staff kind of decides where that should go, and then informs the applicant, like, this is where you fit in, and this is where you should be applying.
Correct. So the types of activities that are eligible for the funding have not changed. Who can apply for that funding based on the type of activity has not changed. We, in our pre-submittal conference, explained to the applicants what types of activities they can apply for and who is eligible to apply. And they submit the application to us, we review it, we do a pre-submittal review. If they've applied under the wrong category, we give them that feedback and give them an opportunity to reapply under the right category. But really, we're following the HUD guidelines for what activity to fund under what funding, okay, by what organization.
Thank you.
Yep.
Once you get to the scoring stage of reviewing the applications, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I can help answer any of those questions. And that's what I have for this conversation.
I think I'll add, doesn't change any of the information, but I think you did make a good observation of this year we are seeing a lot more applicants under all categories and different types of applicants. And I think there's been a lot of work with, there's been a lot of work between the county and the Community Foundation of Southwest Washington on different types of projects with different types of funding. And I know that we've been getting the word out to the community about different funding opportunities that happen, at least that Community Services is overseeing, and we might be seeing some of that happening. And I think the city has also been doing a lot of work as well. And since both the city and the county have home and CDBG programs, I would not be too surprised if next year we also see either a sustained or an increase in proposals and the different types of organizations that have been submitting proposals. So what we have traditionally seen have been infrastructure projects, public facilities, really the only applications received being from the cities, and there may be more competition on that coming up, just based on that. I wouldn't be surprised.
And how does that work? I mean, essentially, even if it's a nonprofit, you give a grant for purchase of that facility. Is that just basically a gift then that stays with the nonprofit? There's no ownership or there's not a lease arrangement where the county's buying the building and leasing that back to the nonprofit with those monies? It just goes to the nonprofit as a block grant?
It goes to the nonprofit with some pretty strict use requirements that stay in a deed and a lien on the property, and it varies a little bit whether it's home or CDBG in terms of the duration and
there's some protections.
There are absolutely protections in. And, I think the Urban County Policy Board does have some influence in decision-making in terms of, kind of going back to Councilor Young, of do we want to prioritize certain types of applications? What are the priorities we want to give and stuff like that? And I think as staff, we would be pretty receptive as long as it's within alignment and not in conflict with any, CFR from, or regulation from HUD in terms of how to run the program. But, you could do things like certain set aside of funding that is for the cities to apply, for example. I don't think there's a federal restriction on that or something. If there was, we can look it up and let you know. But if that's a concern or an interest, you could contemplate things like that.
Perfect, thank you.
I'll also add that any applicant that is not part of the county, urban county agreement that we have is required to, it's a half loan, half grant for those projects. So they do repay part of the payment, where the cities would not, because you're part of the 3-year agreement.
Thank you.
Got a quick question. Does Vancouver's, is their system in line with ours? Are we working through the same process at the same time, or is the timing different on it?
Our systems are fairly close, and we're actually working really closely with them. So you'll see at one of our next meetings, I'll be bringing some suggested changes to our funding guidelines to help align us, one, with some changes that we've kind of been working with already, but also to align better with the City of Vancouver so that our systems are better aligned. We're working with them to align our policies for our tenant-based rental assistance program so they're less confusing for the nonprofits that are operating these programs. So in a lot of ways, yes, we are working to align the systems and the timelines for our applications.
Okay.
I just add, and we have been. So every single year, City of Vancouver will make adjustments to some of their policies and their RFA process, just like we do every year. So there's actually a lot of conversation and interaction with the City of Vancouver staff that's running the RFAs in terms of what are you doing this year, or that was a missed opportunity we had this year. Like next year, let's do better at that to try to align it more. So it isn't a new thing to align them, but it is a continuous thing because since adjustments are made in both organizations, both jurisdictions every single year appropriately, whether it's based on feedback from HUD, changes to guidelines, or changes that are happening in the community. We've been doing it. We are trying to improve alignment now, and more will be required every single year.
Okay, and then has there ever been an instance where an application has been submitted to both jurisdictions for the same project? And how does that work through?
Yeah, so we do actually, and we have some. The Council for the Homeless and the 4D acquisition projects are both joint applications. We work with the City of Vancouver. There's a requirement that they establish what the proportion of Clark County residents versus City of Vancouver residents will be that receive services through whatever that project, program, rehab facility is. And then they have to apply their request based on that proportion. And then also, it was here and then it went. There was another point I was going to make. And the City of Vancouver, for example, both the 4D and the Council for the Homeless projects are actually within the city boundaries, City of Vancouver boundaries. For us to even consider funding that, they have to receive some sort of funding by the City of Vancouver into that project. It doesn't have to be specifically CDBG or home funds, but it does have to be an investment to show that they are wanting to want that project to
We're last money in other words.
I'm sorry?
We're last money in other words for that. So City of Vancouver says.
Yeah, it could be at the same time. If their funding decisions are made after us and this board decides they would like to fund those projects, we would hold moving forward until we knew that the City of Vancouver was putting the funding into it also. Any other questions about neighborly scoring? All right, thank you. Thank you. I'm doing a lot of talking in this meeting for you guys today. So one of the things that I mentioned during the work plan is that we want to make sure that we're bringing more program updates to the board so you know what's going on with us. And one of those issues that we've been having is our CDBG, or Community Development Block Grant timeliness. Some of you that have been around for a while have heard that, and you heard me specifically asking you how your projects are doing, because we need to make sure that we're timely. And so over the last few years, mainly because of the pandemic, but also because we've had unusually high loan repayments, and we had projects that had applied, approved, were awarded, and then not able to move forward for a variety of reasons. We are not considered timely by HUD standards. So HUD does, in May every year, they do a test to show where we are and how much funding we have available for our Community Development Block Grant funds. And to be timely is to be under 1.5 times your annual entitlement amount. So that amount changes every year, and then it's the 1.5 times amount might be adjusted slightly based on what our entitlement is about.
Could I throw something in?
Yes.
When we say 1.5 times the annual funding available, that it's not really available, is what is not spent. So, what is in the account. So the funds could be allocated, they could be contracted, but if they've not been drawn down and you have 1.5 times the amount that it's, pooled in your account, that's what HUD looks at every May. We actually did brief the Urban County Policy Board last year on it. We were hopeful that we were going to be back below the 1.5 over the course of last year, and we haven't yet. So we want to give you a status update on that. Go ahead.
So right now, because we've been untimely for the last 2 years, we are in what's called an informal consultation with our HUD representative, which means additional reporting requirements, additional discussions about when, how we're getting funds out the door and spent, and just making sure that we're trying to stay on top of that and have a plan of action. So we've been doing that for the last several months. And our projections looking at the next timeliness test for May of 2024, we do not anticipate being able to meet the timeliness test for a third year in a row, which may indicate or move us towards a more formal consultation with HUD. We've not experienced this before, so it'll be a new process for us, shall we go to that direction. I will also state that I think it's 80% or more of the jurisdictions across the nation are not timely, and a lot of it is because of the pandemic and the additional funds that we receive, construction not being able to move forward for, a year plus due to pandemic requirements. So it's not, Clark County is not in its own little boat over here. Most of the nation is having an issue, which actually had HUD do waivers for us for 2 years, but last year they determined that they were not going to provide an additional waiver, but many jurisdictions are still having an issue.
A couple things to add. So what what consultation means is HUD reviewing whether or not your entitlement amount needs to change. So, the theory being if you can't spend it, you probably have too much, we need to lower it. So informal consultation takes place for a year. That started in May when we were above 1.5. We're doing reporting to HUD in terms of everything that's been allocated, what is being spent, will be drawn down below 1.5 by this May. I don't think so. That leads to formal consultation, which so far, to my understanding, HUD may ask us for more reporting, but I think it goes into a higher level on the HUD office side in terms of does the entitlement need to change? I do not anticipate formal consultation resulting in a change to Clark County's entitlement for for CDBG. And this applies to CDBG. It's not home in CDBG. The federal funding of CDBG has slightly increased in their straight amount. As Rebecca indicated, this is not something that's unique to Clark County. The pandemic caused a lot of delays in construction and spending across the country. We have, I don't remember the exact percentage, but it is over 70% of jurisdictions are in this process right now because of consultation. So we will continue to keep you informed about where we are at and what comes next with HUD in this process. At this moment, I'm not expecting it resulting in any kind of punitive change or any reduction in entitlement. If that changes, I will immediately let you know. And the other piece I just wanted to touch on is our allocations, like what we requested in proposals in the RFAs is the full amount of funding that we get. So the question will not be, can we allocate it, can we spend it? The issue is always, how fast is it going to get spent out? So at some point, we haven't been able to really, because we're just in this stage of our application review, at some point, I don't know when, but at some point, we will be below the 1.5. The question is going to be when. Because as you indicated, Councilor Young, we have a lot more requests for funding than we have funding available.
Just a quick question on that, if I may. So I'm trying to kind of digest that and understand. I mean, is this an issue that we really need to correct? I mean, it sounds to me like you're not worried about like our entitlement dropping or anything like that. So my question is are things operating the way they should in Clark County? Are, the applications that we're approving, are they being earnestly worked on, and it's just there's extenuating circumstances that's preventing that from happening, or is there a challenge with people just kind of moving too slow? Is there something that we need to address, or are we just saying that it's going the way it should and we'll just deal with the consequences of not being in compliance in that?
So that's a subjective answer. My sense, I think our sense is, on the most part, the system is working as designed, and what we are seeing is the consequence, the effects of different things that came with the pandemic that, that it's going to go back to normal. Prior to the pandemic, we did not have timeliness issues. It's something that we monitored. It's something that we managed. And I think that will be the case, my guess would be in the next 18 months. But there are things that we could do. It's limited how fast we can change our expenditures and drawdowns of funds. But there are things like if we don't see our amount of funds available dropping that have not been drawn down, we might have discussions like, do we increase the limit of applications? Like right now, our application limit is $300,000 per application. Do we need to increase that? Do we need to make, what other changes have we briefly discussed?
So in our funding guidelines, we indicate that if a project does not move forward in 9 months, then we will recapture those funds and reallocate them in the next application process. And we have not been really strict about that. And especially during the pandemic, rightly so, we allowed a lot more flexibility with spending out and moving projects forward. So that is another area where we might need to look at it and be a little bit more strict about, if your project is not moving forward, then we do need to reallocate those funds to a project that can move forward so we can get those funds spent. As our staff transitions are changing, and I'm taking over the full program, I am behind, so I will take some responsibility for this. I'm trying to get everything organized and be able to move projects through. As those that actually do the work for those infrastructure projects, you know, there are a lot of things that have to happen. There's an environmental review process before we can draft a contract and before we can move forward with the project. And then there's a lot of requirements during the construction and a lot of documents that are required to even be able to say, yes, you can fully bill us for that project. So I'll get everything organized, and we'll be moving those projects forward within the next 3 months. I hope to have everything up and running and really streamlined and organized.
And to be clear, I mean, that's not the reason. Like, the staff transition is not the reason, you know, we're in informal consultation is not the reason we're not meeting timeliness. We were in that situation before the staff transition, and it continues to. Our drawdown has increased since we've started, the staff transition. Just to be very clear. And I would not recommend making any like the changes in terms of flexibility and how quickly we pull back funds to reallocate at this point. The most impacted entities, if we did changes like that, would be the cities that are part of the Urban County Policy Board with the infrastructure requirements that have been really struggling with the effects of the pandemic when it comes to contracting and stuff like that. So there have been very good reasons to be flexible as we have. So if we don't see changes happening and improvements in how the funds that are available, like during this year, we might have to have those conversations with the Urban County Policy Board. At this point, I wouldn't recommend that yet. And when we have those conversations, I think it's important for Urban County Policy Board to understand we have to be in compliance with HUD CFRs, and we want to, we must have the program in good standing to the best of our ability, and the program also needs to work for the entities that are part of the Urban County Policy Board.
So just kind of one more thank you for that very long-winded, but it was very explanatory explanation there. I'm curious, and you say it sounds to me like it's just something we're watching very closely, but would there be any value or need to adding to our criteria as we're scoring kind of past performance on that particular measure?
So you should see when I send out notifications, some very objective conversations about each of those applicants as they come in, how many projects they have in the pipeline, if they've been timely on their projects in the past. We will provide that information for you so that you can keep that in mind as you're scoring. And I just want to reiterate a point Michael mentioned, that prior to the pandemic, we have not had timeliness issues. We've been close, but we have not had those issues. I've been with our unit for 15 years, and this is our first time having timeliness issues. So,
thank you.
Is that?
Michael.
Go ahead.
Rebecca, excuse me. An observation, maybe a question. It's my observation that getting timely contracts back from HUD has been difficult the last few years, especially since the pandemic. And with that in mind, I guess I'm asking if that has any effect on when the funds are being spent, because obviously you can't spend the money unless you have an executed contract agreement in place. Secondly, in the construction industry, there's been a lot of market volatility, a lot of things going on that have affected construction projects all over the country and elsewhere. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out and suggest that maybe there may be some external factors that are affecting agencies' ability to spend the money as fast as they may like. If you have any comments on that.
So we're having difficulty hearing you, Jim. Janet, would you mind doing a brief synopsis of what Jim just mentioned so that we might be able to hear it in the room?
I'm sorry, I think it's best if Jim repeat it. We had a bad echo on this side.
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Jim, could you do me a favor? I know we don't usually use the chat for, because for the purposes of meetings, because in public meetings, we want to make sure that it's all verbal and recorded. But if you enter in the chat what you were saying, I will read it out to everyone and answer your question.
Yeah, and that's because of the Open Public Meeting Act requirements. Is why we don't use the chat function. I think what I heard Jim saying a little bit, and we'll clarify with that, is that there's been some delays with the contracting, and then the delays with the projects, and then the delays with being able to expend those funds, which is absolutely part of what was happening with the project. So we will be getting those moved forward. All the files will get organized, and we'll be able to start spending down those funds quickly.
And while Jim is writing that, I'll also mention one thing that the Urban County Policy Board members will be able to monitor meeting by meeting is when we do our quarterly reports and program updates. Rebecca talks about, where that project is at in terms of expenditure and completion. So you'll be able to see where everyone that has been approved and receiving funding is.
My question was going to be, is this true across the board? Because I know we're behind, and I know some of the reasons, but it disturbs me that we're as far behind as we are.
You mean across the board in the county?
Yeah,
Across jurisdictions, absolutely. We have seen, all of our nonprofits and your cities have seen significant turnover in staff. And every time you have staff turnover, projects get delayed. And we recognize that. So when we're doing our evaluation of should we talk to you about recapturing funds, those are kind of the things that we take into consideration. Is it an anomaly that's happening or things like that? But yes, absolutely. Staff turnover, just general delays in construction materials and all of those things, everything impacts the entire project, and that is happening throughout Clark County, throughout Washington State, throughout the nation, and that is why we're seeing so many jurisdictions have timeliness issues, ongoing timeliness issues.
I guess that's a good answer. It's kind of hard to accept that everything is so far behind. It's just like nutso. And I know our growth has stymied us because we were constantly, but it seems like we're starting to level out and be able to move our projects on. But I just wondered if it was the same across the board. It's just like, wow.
We're actually seeing a lot of staff changes and transitions with HUD, with the State Department of Commerce. Our HUD program officer, our unit as well, absolutely. But our HUD program officer has been with us less than a year.
Oh, okay.
As an example. And the fifth one since I've been here.
Yeah.
Well, I'd also be curious how it would, as the state as a whole versus nationally, because I know just speaking as a small city, the transference of the permits from, say, to Department of Ecology, even just for a sidewalk. We don't know how long that process is going to take. We can be waiting 6 months just for a permit for a sidewalk right now.
Correct.
So it's not an easy solution.
And what Jim was saying, thank you, Jim, for the comment, is pointing out that getting timely contracts from HUD has been very slow the last several years. True. 5 to 6 months behind those occurring pre-COVID. Secondly, construction industry has been very volatile in terms of cost and availability of building materials. There seems to be external forces at work that could be adversely affecting timely spending of funds. And absolutely, that is what we have been seeing. I think that's what each, if you're in any kind of infrastructure, public works, local government, I'm sure that's what you've been seeing. And that is why, at this point, I don't have process change recommendations for this. This is an important issue. I want to make sure that the Urban County Policy Board is aware that we did not, we did mention it last year, but just as very, but we're still there. I was hoping last year that by now we would be close to that 1.5, you know, like meeting it or barely above it. You know, we're not yet, but at this point, I don't have process recommendation changes for that reason. And I do think it's going to continue to normalize as we move forward.
So it sounds like we're pretty much doing the right things, and we just hope that HUD gets that. Yep. Okay.
So also under program updates, some of you know that the area that I have worked in primarily over the last several years is our community action programs, which are anti-poverty programs for our community services block group fund. As part of the community services block grant, we're required to do a community needs assessment every 3 years, and we are right in the middle of doing that. We are to the point of doing community forums, and we are trying to get the word out. We want as much participation community-wide, elected officials, general community members, advocates, nonprofit organizations, people who are experiencing poverty, low incomes. We want to hear your voice. The forums are going to be starting tomorrow. Tomorrow is our first one. It is at the Vancouver Library. There's time for doing a data walk during the day, an open house, and then there'll be a more formal forum in the evening. We also have one scheduled in the city of Ridgefield and one in the city of Camas, and along with a a virtual forum. That will be just the forum content, not the open house portion. We are looking to get feedback about programs, about what you're seeing in the community so that we can use that to inform the full needs assessment report that we will release later this year. The bulk of the data we're going to provide to the forum participants and through the open house portion through a data walk is based on a survey of needs that we did at the beginning of January of 2023. We received 893 responses to that survey by people who are low income about their families and what their needs are. So we want to present that to the community and then get feedback on that, along with some small group discussions about how we should be moving forward. Each in-person event includes that open house and then the formal forum in the late afternoon or evening, depending on what location and date you attend. Registration is encouraged. It's not required, but it will help us for planning processes, so we do appreciate registration, especially if you need any special accommodations like interpretation to ensure that we have interpreters available at each of the locations. And then the community needs assessment itself is used to determine the spending directions for us, but we also share it out with all of our elected officials and other funding agencies like the Community Foundation for Southwest Washington to help in their determining uses of their funds for the next couple of years. The community needs assessment has been my baby, essentially, for the last several years, and I receive feedback from many nonprofit organizations and community members about how much the needs assessment means to them, how well they can, research and get some real local information and data for the many projects and funding opportunities that they have.
Just a quick question on that. When that came through on my planner, I plan to attend tomorrow. But so the data walk is essentially like boards set up that you can just walk past. Okay, because I know it was for a really long time. I can't be there all day long. So I was planning on coming at like 4:30 to look at the boards and then stick around for the forum.
Yeah, if you're attending the forum in the evening, you do not need to come earlier because we will have time for the data walk during the event itself.
Okay,
so
that's even better.
We know that not everybody can attend all of the forums or make a commitment to that. So we want to make sure that the data itself at least is available. That's why we have the open house style for a couple of hours before the event.
Great, thank you.
So I hope that you will come, and please share the flyers, and I will send them out to the group so that you have them. They are available in English, Spanish, Russian, Ukrainian, and Chuukese. Please send them out to your networks because we really want to get as much participation in the forums as we can. So with that, I'll move into our quarterly report review. So this is reports for July through September 2023, so it's been a little bit of time for these. Many of the projects have just been kind of trucking along and are going through the process of construction. Many of them were awarded funding in March, and so we were waiting for our HUD entitlement, our grant agreement from them. So you'll see many of them say project awarded funding, but they have not moved forward at this time. And many of the projects that had been going are complete or substantially complete for the construction side. The asset and economic development programs, those all operate on a January through December timeline for those programs, and they have been moving forward with serving their businesses and providing that technical assistance through their programs. Our Proud Ground Home Ownership Assistance Program had one home purchased within the quarter. They're currently working on their third and final home for that contract right now, just last week, as I was working with them on that. And then looking at the affordable housing and homelessness programs, the Central Park Place rehab construction has been complete. We're just waiting for final documents to close out that project. The other two projects with Second Step Housing, they will be combining those two awards for one project moving forward, and we should be seeing the acquisition for that coming soon. And then our tenant-based rental assistance, like our business assistance programs, operate on the January through December timeline, and they've been serving households. A couple of the new programs, the Salvation Army and the YWCA, their programs were delayed to get started, which is not uncommon with brand new programs as they staff up program policies and things like that. So they did not really start serving until late in the into the third quarter and late in the third quarter itself. And then we still have some community development block grant COVID response funds available that we are spending through Mercy Corps. Finished their project, and we were finalizing those documents back in July through September. That project is now done and closed out. And then the Greater Chamber received an award in March, and their program is starting now, along with the Hispanic Metropolitan Chamber. They have their new contract is going through, and they'll be spending that funds this year. And then our home ARP funds, we did a lot of those towards the TBR supports and rent assistance programs for tenant-based rental assistance. And those just finished in December, and we're waiting for their final contracts or invoices for those contracts. So those will be done quickly. And as I mentioned, the Weaver Creek Commons project, they're coming back in for additional funding, and so they'll combine that with their award when they move that project forward. Any questions about the quarterly reports? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And so at this point in time, we're going to other, which is alternate representation updates.
Yeah, so for the bylaws, you have an elected official that is named to the Urban County Policy Board, typically the mayor, but not always the case. And then you can have alternate representatives on the board. We have seen some changes in staff, and so we just wanted to send a reminder out that if you have changes to your alternate representatives, to please notify staff so we can document that, so we have that available when we are doing voting and things like that.
Do we have access, to a live document that shows who is on the board?
So we don't have a live document that would be accessible to people outside of the county because of our IT. We lock everything down. But I can let any of the jurisdictions know who their current alternate representatives are. Just send me an email, and I'm happy to share that with you so that you can see who alternate reps are.
Go ahead.
So I apologize, it's not in here. Just under other, we did receive from HUD a letter that every year they evaluate, is the county meeting and program objectives for home and CDBG. We received that letter within the last 2 weeks for the previous program year. their assessment was that the Clark County is meeting its objectives for both CDBG and Home Successfully. The letter does mention and get into like where we're at in timeliness, and the letter suggested discussing the contents of the letter, including the timeliness, with the Urban County Policy Board and leadership. So we have done that, but I just wanted to make sure you were aware. We received that communication from HUD, and their assessment is that we're meeting program objectives for both.
Great, thank you. Are there any other comments from members of the board at this time? Okay, we'll open it up at this point if there is anybody that would like to testify from the public. Rebecca, do you know if we have anyone?
We do have a couple of people from the general public, but it looks like they have left the meeting, so it does not look like we have any general public.
Okay, well, with that, we will go ahead and adjourn today, and we'll see you
February.
February.
So please note, February's, we are meeting early. We will start the meeting at 8:30 rather than at 9:30 to accommodate all of the application presentations. So we will be in this room or virtual from 8:30 to 11 for that meeting.
Great. Have a great day, everybody.